How is your ancient Egyptian?
Rusty, but I do recognize some of these markings. Especially that one.
Apocalypse.
This speaks of an age when the Pharaoh Rama-Tut seemingly fell from the stars and brought with him some kind of, it doesn't translate, technology, I think. Anyway, he used this as a source of power to take control of the land. During this time, a mutant gray-skinned infant was abandoned in the desert to perish. The child's cries were answered when he was found by a tribe of bandits ruled by a warrior named Baal. He saw the power in the child and took him as his own. He named him Sabah, which means the first one. Under Baal's protection and training, Nur became a powerful warrior. His speed and strength were without equal. No one could touch him. He was unnatural. Rumors of Sabah inhuman might had reached the Pharaoh Rama-Tut, who saw Nur as a threat to his rule and ordered his destruction. In the end, Baal and his army were defeated. Only Sabah remained. Since nothing could withstand his wrath, Sabah took the name Apocalypse.
I am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Baals. Prepare for Prattle.
Pod. Welcome to Prattle World. I am your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider-Dan. And in this podcast, I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that a mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to another Puny Pod, a short-form podcast where I visit a specific film or comic book all by myself. And yes, it's been a wild year so far. The patrons have been picking all sorts of stuff. Unfortunately, due to delays and rescheduling and life getting in the way for my guests and myself, and illnesses and families and friends, all sorts of stuff, all good stuff. I've had to delay a few, so now all the Patreon choices for the public episodes are over, but I am going to continue to do some Patreon exclusive choices for them, and then next year we're going to continue that trend. I might pull back and maybe just have the one public Patreon poll, but just gives me a bit of leeway that way, and I can't, sometimes it's just not possible for us to fit a square peg in a round hole. So this month I've decided to not have any guests, and it's just going to be me. I felt like we've not done comics for a while, and I feel like I need to get back to that. I've been doing lots of comics on Patreon, which is many licensed comics or comic book continuations, as I like to call them. So we did X-Men 97 over on Comics in Motion earlier this year. Me, Max, Dave, Tonya, Sarah, Ben, all were guests. Rhea was supposed to be a guest but couldn't quite make it. But we've been kind of set up for a heck of a season 2. Very exciting. And I thought, why not cover the comics that have inspired or look to be inspiring that second season? So spoilers for the end of X-Men 97 if you haven't seen it. This is your Tonya Todd spoiler warning. it ends with the X-Men scattered in time, some in ancient Egypt, some in the far-flung future, some we don't know where they are, so they could be anywhere, but also we see the present and where the X-Men are in that regard. It looks really interesting, very exciting. I love the show. I think it's some of the best TV I've seen for a long time. I had high hopes, but was cautiously optimistic as well. Wonderful show, amazing. It was great to talk about it, and I know it was a little difficult with stuff we were doing. I was away for a bit and everything, but it was really wonderful to talk about that every week with Max and everybody else. Really, really good show. So I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. But I will be going into spoilers for the end of the show, what may be and may happen in season 2 as well. So the stuff I'm going to talk about today is going to maybe, it depends how they adapt it. There might be slavishly, being, very faithful to what there is here, but I feel like they're just going to do their kind of own thing with it. I think they'll be inspired by it, but I think they're going to kind of do their own thing, because there are issues, not just comic book issues, but other issues I'm going to get into with this particular book and maybe the other one as well next month. So this month, the end of X-Men 97, again, they're flung into time, different places in time, displaced in time, some of the X-Men here, some of the X-Men there. And again, some end up in ancient Egypt, and they meet Sabah, who is the first one, supposedly, the first mutant. And he would go on to become one of their most fiercest foes. Their dark side, their Thanos, the X-Men's version of that. Apocalypse, who is a biblical-esque kind of creature who believes in survival of the fittest. He will winnow out the weak, and he sees himself as the fittest. But he wants to create a world around that kind of particular dogma, that credo. And I've always been a big fan of the character. I think in the animated series, the voice actor that portrayed him was such booming, wonderful, like a poetic, prophetic kind of language. He's very fascinating, this huge kind of powerful, mad entity, mad titan, if you will, that, creates these kind of horsemen of the apocalypse. Again, very kind of ancient, old, biblical. He knows things. He can outsmart people. He is in complete control of his molecular structure. He can do basically anything. Energy manipulation. He can heal himself, resurrect himself, come back even stronger. He has access to technology from the future. He has access to celestial technology. If you watch the Eternals, you know who those guys are. Basically, he has the ability to do anything. He is very, very powerful, though he does show signs of weaknesses, and I like the kind of hypocrisy within the character as well, because there are times where he is very, very weak. He is weak, and if he was really living by his dogma, maybe go, I'm not the fittest anymore, But he does, I like the fact that he often can, transfer his body into different people and into different, host bodies to survive, or he'll go into a kind of a hibernation thing. So I love that side of the character, even though he believes in this kind of, has this belief that actually he's a bit of a hypocrite when it comes to it, because he has been defeated soundly time and time again, killed, but he always comes back in some form of this eternal, never-ending evil. I think in the animated series, Cable talks about killing him and getting rid of him permanently, and talks about him being the embodiment of evil. And they go back to ancient Egypt to try and kill him before he becomes who he is. I think that was the plan, if I remember rightly, in the Axis of Time, Beyond Good and Evil. I think which makes sense to the kind of things they're discussing in that. But yeah, wonderful character. I'm looking forward to see what the show does with him, because you're going to have him in present day and the X-Men fighting him potentially being fought in ancient Egypt, and then also him in the far future where Cable is being brought up, because Scott and Jean end up in the future where they meet technically their son. Madeline Pryor, the clone of Jean, is it's a whole thing. Watch the show. It'll tell you everything you need to know really about it. The Cliff Notes, anyway, the Cliff Notes version. So we have these two comics. So I want to do this. So X-Men: The Rise of Apocalypse, and next month I'm going to do X-Men: The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix. So that will deal with the future and them raising Cable, which is again hinted in the show. Not quite the same way, but it's an adaptation. I don't mind either way. And then this issue, this comic, this particular miniseries will deal with the Alpha to Apocalypse, and that will deal more so with his Omega, so to speak. He does play a role. I think it's a fairly minor role to a degree, but he is about and he will be there. And we'll see that kind of old, frail man kind of wanting to take over a different body, sort of thing. So, yes. Anyway, aside from that, I want to talk about this comic. So, I read it a while ago, and I'm reading it again because it's come up in the show. So, here we are. So, again, I've given all the spoilers for this comic as well. But it's X-Men The Rise of Apocalypse, written by Terry Kavanagh, James Felder, art by Adam Polina, Anthony Williams, inked by Martin Morales, Harry Candelario, and Al Milgram. The story starts off in ancient Egypt, and there is a sandstorm attacking the area of Aqaba. And they're talking about what they've had to do to a certain child recently that was born in the camp. The Sandstormers are basically a group of bandits led by Baal, and they live by the credos of survival of the fittest. And Baal he rides in with the sandstorm and attacks the village and kills people within it. Basically, that's the idea. That's how they attack. And he is Baal, the leader of this group, is looking for somebody or something. He's trying to find them, or it, whatever it may be. We're not really made aware. But they discover a crying child who has grey skin, who has been abandoned by a family in Aqaba because of his looks, because of these blue lips and the way he looks entirely. But Baal knows something about this child. This child is special. This is somebody different who has a future ahead of them. So he adopts the child, even though the other bandits are kind of fearful and they hate it and not quite sure what that child is or is going to be. Baal even kills somebody who goes to kill the child. And then he names him En-Sabah-Nur, which means the first one. So kind of, again, setting up this future for what we will come to know and who we will come to know as Apocalypse. So years later, he's about 17 or so, and we're introduced to Pharaoh Rama-Tut. I'll get into him shortly. He has, I'm sure you probably heard about him in the last few years, but I'll go into it very briefly. His general, Ozymandias, or Ramesses II, as he's more widely known, and the Vizier Logos. And Logos has discovered heard word of a young man who is very powerful and is something that Rama-Tut has been looking for. And he's already aware of this child. He's already aware of this young man and the power that this young man holds. And he orders Ozymandias and his army to go capture the child, or capture the young man, 17 now, and kill the remaining bandits. So Rama-Tut is a classic Marvel character. Rama-Tut is basically, you'll all know of Kang the Conqueror if you're paying attention to the MCU at the moment. Whether he's going to be showing up in the future, I don't know. Time will tell, quite literally, with that time-traveling Conqueror character. But Rama-Tut made his first appearance in Fantastic Four. He was a time traveler who lived in a utopia absolutely perfect utopia. Nobody worried. Everyone was fed. All society lived in peace. But he was bored. He was basically bored of living in a utopia. He craved adventure, excitement, and he finds the plans for a time machine from one of his ancestors. Now, it's theorized his name is Nathaniel Richards, so it is either theorized that he is a descendant of Reed Richards, or he is, or his father, who is also called Nathaniel, or that he's a descendant of Doctor Doom, or maybe an alternate or future or past version of Doctor Doom. It's more likely that it's more on the Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four definitely said 100% he was related, because they didn't name him at this point. He was just known as Rama-Tut. And in that story, they time travel, they find themselves in ancient Egypt, and then Rama-Tut already knows who they are because he's from the future and has future knowledge. He enslaves them, tries to marry Sue, force her to marry him as his new kind of queen, so to speak, and they again manage to kind of escape, and they manage to defeat Rama-Tut, and he escapes back into the future, which he modeled his spacecraft or his time machine after the Sphinx. So we'll learn more about that. So that story happens within this story, which can cause there's a bit of a disconnect, I'll be honest, but we'll get into it. But that happens within this. So he describes himself in this as kind of a time looter, that he's looking for power and jewels and adventure, and he comes with this future technology, and that's why he can enslave all of Egypt. So he becomes the new Pharaoh and takes on the name Rama-Tut. After this, he would go into a time travel anomaly, which would actually split him into technically several different beings. So one version of himself went into the far future and he became Kang the Conqueror. One version, he remained as Rama-Tut. Another version, he became the Scarlet Centurion. And all these characters would crop up and would more so become villains of the Avengers and less so of the Fantastic Four, but there is some, again, connected tissue there. And Doctor Doom and Kang team up and hate each other and fight all the time. He's killed him a couple of times and vice versa. So they have this kind of relationship as well. I think there was a comic recently that came out, a Doctor Doom comic, where they had to, reluctantly team up. Who knows if, in the future, the MCU maybe Kang becomes a version of Doctor Doom. They could do that. It could work. They're quite similar in a lot of ways. Doctor Doom created arguably the first time platform until it was retconned that Reed Richards' dad had created that before Doom. So it could be either of them. Or maybe it's a mixture of the families. Maybe the families mix at some point. I don't know. But I'm sure they'll decide what they're doing with the MCU eventually, but I think bring Doctor Doom in as soon as you can. Do it. So Ozymandias goes out to this encampment. During this point, En-Sabanur, or Apocalypse, as he would become to be known, is having a trial by combat, a rite of passage, because he's now becoming a man. Baal then reveals to him that Rama-Tut, he saved him. So when Rama-Tut came from the future, a small part of his craft fell out of the Sphinx. Fell out of the Sphinx and landed near their encampment. He and Rama-Tut was blinded. He was injured, so they kind of brought him back to health. He left. He disappeared for a large amount of time. He came back and he had already enslaved all of Egypt with his technology, what he already had with him. But he couldn't find his original pod that came out of the Sphinx. So he must have gone to the Sphinx and used that and come back to it. So then Baals attacked, all the Sandstormers were attacked. He does not reveal where the location of the original pod was. There's something in there. And this is where Baal learnt of Apocalypse, learnt of En-Sabanur in the future through something called the Eye of Ages, which is kind of a future historical kind of diary or history. It projects images, and it projects images directly into your mind. You might not necessarily understand them or be able to work it out, but that's what it does. And while they're down there, the battle on the top of the sands with Ozymandias and the Sandstormers, causes a cave-in, and crushes and traps Apocalypse and Baal down in that cavern. And then Apocalypse is freed by Baal, is almost dead, but starts to instantaneously heal and becomes more powerful and stronger. He grows in size, and this seems to happen throughout the book. Every time he's almost killed or has something happen to him, he comes back stronger. So, you know, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Survival of the fittest is all tying into that kind of character and what his particular kind of modus operandi is. So, and Apocalypse, having seen what we've seen on the walls, the carvings of himself, the images, the hieroglyphics, information that is gleaned from the Eye of Ages, he is kind of renewed with energy, and they spend weeks trying to escape this cavern, and they're starving, and Baal succumbs to death, and Apocalypse, you know, he's been feared and hated his entire life, and Baal's the only person who's shown him any kindness, any kind of sweetness and support, because Baal knows he's kind of destined for great things from what he's seen from the Eye of Ages and everything within this craft, within this time machine, part of the time machine. He climbs out of this cavern. Ozymandias almost dies. He climbs out and returns back to Egypt, and Rama-Tut is not happy because he's not found the child. The child is supposedly dead, and Sabah is supposedly dead, and so in punishment, he's going to marry Ozymandias' wife. And but he said the child is dead. Ozymandias didn't find the child. He just wanted to kill everybody because he doesn't want Rama-Tut to have what he wants, because Rama-Tut knows of Apocalypse and wants to make him his heir because he's one of the most powerful beings in history, according to Rama-Tut. So after almost dying in the cave, he comes out, and Logos finds him and basically takes him in, disguises him as a slave, so he can get round the building and the you know, his get round without being recognized for his grey skin, his blue lips, and everything. So they do that, and while he's in the palace, he hears Neferi crying. He notices her and falls in love with her because she's very beautiful. And she doesn't want to marry Rama-Tut. She doesn't like Ozymandias anymore because, you know, he used to be a sweet, nice person, but Rama-Tut's way of working and the way he, you know, controls Egypt is cruel, and you know, they have, you know, multitude of slaves and various other things. So yeah, so while he's being hid, he's having to be forced to work as a slave, and he's carrying up these huge stones by himself, showing that he's different and he's stronger than anybody else, and he is the strongest. And Ozymandias is like whipping all the slaves and everything, and he's again very treacherous character. He doesn't like Rama-Tut. He wants to rise up and take his throne, and he's hoping he can do that through his sister Neferi. And during the whipping, Apocalypse is thrown from the pyramid and falls and seemingly dies, but then his powers again kind of emerge, and he can fly. He's projecting energy, becomes again stronger and bigger as this happens. The slaves now see him as a god and try and protect him from Ozymandias, and a stranger comes and kind of carries him away to safety. So at this point, we are introduced to the Fantastic Four. So again, everything that I've talked about in that previous story is happening within this story. So the focus of Rama-Tut seems to now be on the Fantastic Four, because he's saying, now I don't remember any of the chronologues kind of saying that this happened, so I must be affecting time now. The things must be changing because I am here. Things are happening differently than they were recorded. And he doesn't have the Eye of Ages, so he doesn't know all the information, or he hasn't got access to all the information that he once had. So yeah, he kind of focuses on that, and he wants Sue to become his wife, so he kind of forgets about Neferi. And stranger who saved Ensabanur turns out to be Neferi, and she's fallen in love with him and his power, but he doesn't want to show his face because he feels, his blue lips and his countenance would be, repulsive to her. They basically they do capture Ensabanur because he wants to sneak into the Sphinx and steal Rama-Tut's power for himself. In the meantime, Logos has been revealed as being treacherous to Rama-Tut and Ozymandias because they brought in a seeming, stranger into the building, and they said that's him, isn't it? Rama-Tut is not happy with Ozymandias either because of his, he said you said the boy was dead. You lied to me. But they team up and kill Logos, and they crucify Logos, basically. And as they are kind of going to kill Neferi and Logos, they reveal to the world, to Egypt at large, that that Apocalypse is now going to be his heir, Rama-Tut's heir to his throne, basically, and reveals his blue lips to the crowd, to everyone, as a god, as something other, as something powerful. This is very disgusting to Neferi. She thinks he's hideous and disturbing and wrong, like his grey skin and blue body, his blue lips and face. She's absolutely distraught and scared by this. And then he rebels. He attacks Rama-Tut, but Rama-Tut uses his ultra-diode ray, which was the weapon he used in that original 1960s issue of the Fantastic Four. He's injured, but then he will later escape. Neferi is then thrown into a kind of cavern full of the dead slaves because of they rebelled. Ozymandias basically killed them all and then threw their bodies in this pit. There's a giant snake in there, and there's several other little snakes, very Indiana Jones. And we see that Apocalypse comes to save her as well. He comes to, even though she thinks he's hideous, he still loves her, and he saves her life anyway. But then Ozymandias comes in and attacks, and Apocalypse finally kind of unleashes his raw power and grows in size and attacks them, uses energy and his strength to defeat all of the soldiers. But then he runs off to the Sphinx to try and again steal the power and the secrets of Rama-Tut's technology from Rama-Tut. And Ozymandias follows him, and in this section, Rama-Tut is fighting the Fantastic Four again from that classic issue, the 60s issue I mentioned, his first appearance, and they drive him off. As they're driving him off, Ozymandias finds where the Eye of Ages would have been in the craft, in the Sphinx part of the craft. So we see that it must have been maybe this version of this pod, maybe it was an escape pod that kind of flew out of the Sphinx thing for safety, but didn't quite work for Rama-Tut. But he discovers, he's like, oh, finally I can understand and learn all these secrets that Logos had and that Rama-Tut had, and an Apocalypse comes in and he attacks him and says, now I have full control of my power. I'm going to turn you into the thing you hate most. You're going to be like my slave. And he throws him into the machine that would have had the Eye of Ages in, and it gives him all of the kind of history. His brain is kind of overloaded by it, but the entire kind of history of, I don't know, Earth or Apocalypse or Kang or what all the information that Kang had at his disposal, Rama-Tut had at his disposal. And now that he's done that, Ozymandias is now his slave and his chronicler, which is something they do within this book. You kind of have pages where it's like, this is from the Chronicles of Ozymandias, and he kind of explains everything. It kind of explains very briefly who Rama-Tut was and what happened in that original issue of Fantastic Four, to kind of give you a bit more insight. Which again, I'll get into that in a little while, but after that, he leaves the Sphinx. It all kind of explodes. The lab explodes. The Sphinx goes back into time. All of the kind of slaves of Egypt are now looking to him as a godlike figure, and he says, "No, I'm going to leave. This is not what I want. I'm leaving. I don't care for any of you weaklings, so to speak." and off he goes on his travels. 50 years later, he does return, and Neferi is there, and she's in bed, and she's dying, and she's old, and the whole empire is crumbling. And he said, "I have now returned. Apocalypse returns," and he is here just to kind of, laugh at her as she dies and as the empire crumbles, and that's what he's doing. So yeah, I think in that time he's had kind of more adventures, seen more things, and done more stuff. But yeah, so that's it basically. That is the mini series. It's a mixed bag. I'll say that. I think the artwork is very ugly. I'll not hold back on it. It is a very ugly comic. It's hard to look at. I don't know if it's maybe the inking or it's just a very specific style, but it's not nice to look at. There's not really any like decent, what I've been describing might sound epic and interesting, and but yeah, it's not quite what I wanted or what I would have liked, I think, out of what this could have been. So my main issue with the story, other than the artwork, which is blotchy, it's dark, it's dull, it's not very well composed. Apocalypse, the way Apocalypse looks varies from panel to panel wildly. All of the kind of Egyptian pharaoh characters have these really long and weird faces. I'd might even go so far as they look kind of almost like racist caricatures, almost. Again, that's purely my opinion. It's not artwork that I actually really like. I know several of the artists that I don't know them personally, but I know there was several artists, several inkers, but I just does not look nice at all. It's really not interesting to look at. It doesn't grab your eye. But yeah, that's my main issue with the book, I'd say, is that I think the story is okay. It's okay. I think the fact that they use Rama-Tut is kind of half of the problem, because he's the villain until he's not. He's like the big bad until the Fantastic Four turn up, and it's kind of like all of that happens off screen, sort of thing. It's like it's and the book is assuming you know who this character is, really, and they're assuming you've read or know of that storyline with the Fantastic Four. So much so in the version I've got, which is a reprint of the 4 issues, but also has that kind of additional content. They talk about the creation of Apocalypse and how it came to be, and they include the first 2 issues where he made his first appearance, but they also include all this kind of a filling in of the background of the characters. So they have Ozymandias talk about his own history and himself, and they talk about Neferi, and they talk about Rama-Tut, and then again you see panels, in a sense, kind of the Cliff Notes version of that appearance in that original Fantastic Four issue. But this is my issue, is because he's in it, and then he's the main antagonist, but then he's not, because the Fantastic Four have already taken care of him. Like, for me, now it does get to a point in the continuity where it's kind of, obviously they're going off the continuity that's already been previously established. I think in an earlier issue of X Factor, in at some point after this, he meets somebody who is another external, which is a long-lived mutant, and he has a celestial ship, or he finds celestial technology, which then Apocalypse takes off him and uses, and there's a history with that as well. It becomes X Factor's base. It's sentient. And it combines with Apocalypse's own body, thanks to Cable, who infects him accidentally with his own techno-organic virus, which his techno-organic virus was based on Apocalypse's own blood, so kind of ends up kind of this weird kind of time paradox, because he's a time traveler. He's gone back in the past, almost kills him, but gives him the ability to become more powerful. But I think he manages to send the ship into the into space to stop him from being on Earth for a long period of time. Again, you can look it up all on Wikipedia, his entire history and stuff. So when he gets that celestial ship, he says that he already knows, technology. So I guess you do need Rama-Tut to a degree, or some characters, or something that where Apocalypse can know about advanced technology. But I think for this, you either have it that Rama-Tut has left and has left behind some technology that Apocalypse can then get its hands on, use, and then Ozymandias can be the main antagonist. I think that would have been a better idea. Or maybe have him appear at the end as maybe Apocalypse is just got his power. He's finally overcome Ozymandias, and now here comes, Rama-Tut, maybe as a kind of a secondary antagonist. He just arrives and takes over, or starts to take over, and then maybe Apocalypse has to flee, and then that leads into the issue with the Fantastic Four. But putting it in like slap dab in the middle of it doesn't make it that interesting, because you have to fit it round that issue. So that issue has to play out as it's going to play out. So Apocalypse can't be there. All this other stuff has happened. And like this has been revisited, this particular issue, several times. Like Doctor Strange has an issue where I think he's in his astral form, and he goes back in time and he's there, or maybe even helping them out. So we've got Apocalypse, Ozymandias, Doctor Strange, the Fantastic Four, Rama-Tut, all this shit going on that's already in the previous continuity. Why bring it up again? Why use it again while within trying to tell this Apocalypse story? Like, you either have him that he's gone, he's been banished by the Fantastic Four, or have him at the end when he kind of just arrives, and then, you can do something with that, maybe. But having it slap bang in the middle of this 4-issue miniseries doesn't work for me. That's my main issue, and I feel like the rest of it kind of works. I just think maybe if Ozymandias had been the lead antagonist and you'd lowered Apocalypse's power level and just had him slowly kind of get more and more powerful as it goes on, I think that would have made for far more an interesting story. Because again, we know that Ozymandias, again, from previous continuity, we know that he's going to end up as Apocalypse's slave. So how do we get there? Why do we get there? What happens? I think that would have been far more interesting than what we actually get. And again, it doesn't help that it's a fucking ugly book. It's really not a good looking book. The covers are okay, but even then I'm just like, it's just like, I like the 90s, but there's a lot of bad 90s artwork. Like, some of the worst artwork you will see comes out of the 90s. And it's usually just people trying to emulate different styles. I don't know if maybe this was trying to emulate a Todd McFarlane style or something, but it's fucking hideous. I'm really sorry to say that, but it does not look good. I think even the artists on their best days would probably say this is probably some of their worst work. I'll be honest. It is not a pretty book. And unfortunately, I think there was a way to do this and have it be more succinct. Like, if you read Magneto Testament, which is a wonderful story, an amazing story. It's his time in Auschwitz and the concentration camp. It's horrible and dreadful and tragic, but it's done well. And again, the reason Magneto doesn't use his powers when he's a child is because he gets a disease of some kind. I think it's polio. I think he gets, or something, which stops him from using his abilities. So there's something there that you could have done with this, that he is a slave and he's not necessarily powerful, but then rises to power and overthrows the Pharaoh. And there's something along those lines you could have done with this. But unfortunately, that's not the case, because again, he's already kind of powerful. He's a warrior, and so there's something to it. There is something here you could have done. And I think in later years, there's better stories kind of, telling this idea, or using this idea and the history of Apocalypse to go and do something with. But unfortunately, this particular story just falls a little bit flat. There are elements that I like. Again, the use of Ozymandias as a treacherous guy. I know there's, maybe they could have tied in, maybe they could have had him going to the celestial ship at the end of this, but he's had some, he's found some of the previous Kang technology that was left behind by him. Again, if he was at the end, or he was at the beginning, or he wasn't there, but there was stuff he'd left behind, or maybe Ozymandias was using the technology that Kang had left behind. He found a way to use it or to make use of it. Maybe he found the Eye of Ages and it gave him the intelligence to use the technology. I just feel like there's a million ways you could have played this and it'd be much better. Unfortunately, it is not one of the best X-Men books out there. The X-Men, littered the 90s. Some great stuff there, and again, great ideas here as well. But they're just not, it's just not succeeding where it could do. And I think there are ways to do it. There are elements you could use to make this a successful story, but they are not. Again, concept, idea, on point. I just think it's the writing and the artwork really let the idea down. The potential that this story had was just out of this world. It could have really been really interesting. And again, it's kind of wishy-washy. He'll be really strong, then he's not. He'll be, really weak, and then he's not. And then he's really sensitive, then he's not. Then he's really nice, and and he's loving, and he cares, and and then he's not. But I don't know. I didn't feel like this was an origin story worthy of the character. And again, I think we've had better stories, better Apocalypse stories told by better writers, by better artists. It's just really, really unfortunate that this one just came out and it's just not good, guys. I'm really sorry. Feel free to read it. Give it. You might like it. I don't know, but for me, it was just it's a hard read, and I'm sure X-Men 97 are going to adapt it in a much more successful way. But yes, so next podcast, the next couple of weeks, will be the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, which is Nathan Dayspring Ascani's son Summers in the future with Mother Ascani, and Cyclops and Jean are going to raise him as best they can, and we'll see what kind of trouble he gets into, and can he survive this harsh future he's been delivered to by Ascani and his parents, basically. So we will find out. And who is Mother Ascani? Yes, you'll find out. You'll find out. I'll go through all of that as well. But yes, I hope you've enjoyed this. I know it's not been a great book, but I hope it gives you an insight what we might see potentially in the new X-Men 97 series. Maybe they'll completely avoid Kang altogether, because I know the actor at the moment is extremely problematic in many ways. So maybe they'll avoid that. Maybe they'll do something else. Maybe there's definitely in the background there's a huge kind of globe which looks like advanced technology, which maybe they'll just make celestial technology. It might be easier, or whatever they want to do. I'm down for. I'm sold no matter what. I'm first day that is out, I'll be watching, and we'll be doing more podcasts on Comics in Motion. I'll leave the links again in the show notes if you want to listen to that wonderful set of podcasts with a wonderful set of people, exceptional, if you will. But yes, and I'd like to thank all of my patrons as well before I finish. So Tony Farina, I Am Jack's Musings, Simon Cotton, Paul Mellon, Mike Byrne, Angry Andy, Tonya Todd, Math, Scott Hodgson, Ria Carrigan, and Sarah Coyne. As always, you can find me at spiderdownthesecretboars.com, and please subscribe to the Pop Culture Collective newsletter at pccnewsletter.com. All right, guys, I'll see you soon. Take care, and hopefully the next comic will be excellent as opposed to this one. But yeah, thank you again. As always, prepare for Prattle.